Hello. Welcome, Kristen LaValley, to the Untangled Faith podcast. I am very happy to have you here. Love about you. This is why I loved you. Number one, you're like allergic to platitudes.
That is true.
And number two, you didn't seem to be afraid of people expressing their emotions, their feelings, their pain or confusion about faith.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't have been unusual. But at the time in 2019, Amy needed that.
Mhm.
And so my first question for you, Kristen, is would, I don't know, 2010 Kristen recognize Kristen's ability to like hold space for messy things in the world?
No,
What happened?
not at all. 2010 Kristen would be like, I stopped being a Christian? What happened to me? I don't know. I think I just went through some really hard things that made me appreciate how complicated things can get, how complicated our faith can get. And I learned to not be so afraid of the journey that we can go on. And so when I look at other people who went through the same thing that I went through, I can't panic because I'm like, oh, you're going to be okay. I was okay.
Yeah.
And I would have thought, you can't go through what I went through and still end up with Jesus on the other side of it. And yet here I am.
Here you are. Yeah, I remember messaging you and being like, just thank you for existing. And my husband had recently left his job working for Dave Ramsey, and you did not feel like you needed to tell me to not talk about that.
Yeah.
Stop, Amy. You're gossiping. You didn't
Yeah.
say you didn't feel like you needed to protect anyone's image. And
Yeah.
I was just really grateful for that. So thank
Oh,
you for
I'm
that.
glad. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad that it honored your experience in that way.
So one thing I love about your book that you have coming out, even if he doesn't, which comes
Hmm.
out so soon,
So soon.
like is every chapter you have sort of this like, here's kind of how we get it wrong. And
Hmm.
here's just a little shift of like a different way of looking at things.
Hmm.
It reminded me of Kate Bowler's book, Everything
Hmm.
Happens. And she has a list on her blog. I'm going to read to you
Okay.
of the top 5 worst religious cliches for people in pain. And I'm going to have you choose one of them that you are going to burn to the ground.
Oh,
I know it's going to be hard to choose,
okay.
but you choose one. Okay, so
Okay.
here are the 5 top worst cliches.
Okay.
God needed an angel.
Mm.
God is closing a door, but opening a window.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Number 4, God never gives us more than we can handle. And number 5, everything happens for a reason. Which one would you like to
Oh
burn?
my gosh.
Burn to
Oh.
ashes.
All of them, but I can only choose one. Oh man, they're all just like rife with bad theology, aren't they? And I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
rip it all apart. I would say the one that I would burn is, what was the second to last one? I don't want to say it
That God
wrong.
never gives us more than we can
Yeah, that
handle.
one. Never gives us more than we can handle. I
Tell
would
me why.
just, from the very first word, implying that God gives us all of this crap that we have to deal with is bad enough as it is. So God did all this to me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
And he doesn't
yeah,
give us more than we can handle. That is not true. We cannot handle anything. We
yeah.
live our lives unable to to handle. At least I do. I don't know. I feel like I can't handle anything, but I don't think that God gives us anything. And that kind of theology, it just makes you feel like God is out to get you, and that couldn't be furthest from the truth. So you know what? Just burn it, set it on fire.
That's all.
Yeah,
Set that
that's
one
out,
on fire.
gone.
Yes.
Bye.
The
We don't miss you.
in her book, Everything Happens, Kate talks about the cliche of God's gonna give you a window. And she talks about her friend who's like in a wheelchair. He's like, I can't even get to the damn window.
Who's gonna
What
open this
am I
window for me?
supposed
And
to
what happens when I launch myself out of the window?
what am I supposed to do with all these damn windows? I think he said. I think people are well-meaning though. I've said
Sure.
so many stupid things. Past Amy thought she knew all the answers. And then life happens, right? When
Right.
you have experienced hard things, it causes you to think through things. At least I think it should. And I think
Yeah.
that's your argument in this whole
Yeah.
book is that if we're honest about our faith,
Hmm.
life happens.
Yeah.
And then what do we do? What do we do when life bumps up against these ideas that we had about scripture and God.
Mhm.
I want you to tell me about Mr. Skinny Jeans and how you open up your book and your thoughts on that.
There are two antagonists in my book, Mr. Skinny Jeans and a first grader named Emily. Mr. Mr. Skinny Jeans is it was a real account. I actually found the screenshot on my phone the other day of when I sent that
I love
post
it.
to my husband, and the Skinny Jeans post was, don't let your circumstances change the way that you view God. And Mr. Skinny Jeans became for me the embodiment of the horrible, simplistic things that people say when they haven't gone through anything really, really painful and really, really complex, or when they have and they are just in denial about how that affected them. So he's kind of become an invisible character in my book and in my life. Like anytime
Yeah.
I see a post like that, I'm like, okay, Skinny Jeans,
Yeah.
all right, get off the stage. You don't know what you're talking about.
Poor skinny jeans are getting a bad rap. But the whole
Sorry.
argument of like that your circumstances shouldn't impact how you view God, that just feels so detached
So
with
detached.
reality.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of things that we say, it's incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's something there maybe, but like the incomplete thing can be really confusing
Mm-hmm.
and really painful
Yeah,
for people.
for
Would you say
sure.
that's true?
Definitely. Yeah. You present these simplistic things and they become absolute truth to us. They become a formula for us and it works until it doesn't work anymore. And then when it doesn't work anymore, everything falls apart.
Yeah. I highlighted or I wrote down a bunch of notes as I was reading. And one thing that I wrote down was how you said that sometimes the fear of like changing our minds, if we're afraid of changing our minds, that can get in the way of finding truth. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you expand on that because I think some people equate changing our mind with being oh, well, we've just given up on the truth, right? Like
Yeah.
we have compromised. The idea that like we are standing firm on our
Mm-hmm.
theology, we will never change our minds because we're so strong in our faith. Tell me what's missing with that.
I think I just can't see faith as certainty anymore and having these really rigid ways of thinking and believing because if scripture tells us anything, it's that we can't understand anything of what's going on. We can't even
Yeah.
comprehend the love of God. We can't comprehend what any of this is at any given time. And I think faith is something that moves. It's something that has a heartbeat. It's something that trusts, and it's something that you can't always nail down into a doctrinal statement or a theological statement. Sometimes you just have to have faith that you're going to be okay, that God is with you and God is present with you. And when you get these things that you're so sure of, these faith formulas that are never going to change, then what happens is you just fracture yourself because there's no way to hold on to those things all the time without coming face to face with something that contradicts what you're holding so tightly to. And when that happens, when your formula isn't working, when your doctrine is failing you, you can either double down and ignore the reality of what's happening in front of you, or you can open your hand and say, all right, either I'm wrong, my doctrine's wrong, maybe I don't understand
Yeah.
this, but I'm gonna seek it, I'm gonna pursue, and I'm gonna try to figure this out because I can't keep standing still. I have to move forward. I have to find a way to heal. I have to find a way to function. I have to find a way to make the world make sense around me again, or for me to be at peace with it not making any sense
Yeah.
at all. And you
Yeah.
can't do that when you're standing still.
Yeah, and that's a really active faith, I would
Yeah,
say. They're wrestling
definitely.
with it because you
Mhm.
haven't just said, I figured it out. I'm putting it on the shelf. I don't have to think
Yeah.
about it anymore. The actual, oh, okay, God, I thought this was true about you, but it doesn't feel
Mhm.
like it is. What are we
Yeah.
going to do about this?
Yeah.
And I love how you say that that is actually a sign of like a really healthy relationship. You
Yeah.
don't come to a God that you don't trust and say,
Mhm.
I'm side eyeing you, God. I have a side eye about these verses
Mhm.
and about my lived experience because my lived
Yeah.
experience feels different.
Yep. For
And
sure.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. We would want our kids to come to us. I
Yeah.
mean, they when and if they think we're just going to be angry, they're not going to come to us. If
Right.
they don't trust us, if we don't have an attached relationship, they're not going to ever bring that to us. And we don't
Yeah.
want that. That's all kinds of messed up.
Yeah,
So,
you could have a whole conversation about how attachment affects our faith too.
yes, you had said maybe in your launch team, or maybe it was in the book, how you had
Mhm.
always assumed that your first book would be about your church experience. Like,
Yeah.
you had a really hard
Mhm.
traumatic church experience.
Yes, I
Um,
did.
so many of my listeners are here because they've been hurt or
Mhm.
disillusioned with their Christian faith. They think
Yeah.
for the most part they still trust Jesus,
Mhm.
but like some things have just gone really badly. They've seen
Mhm.
it go badly. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about how that experience for you
Mhm.
has colored the way you interact with people that say, like, raise your hand and say, I had a hard experience. Like, this was
Mhm.
hard. This thing happened to me. How do you respond to that in light of your own
Mm.
background?
Usually I just want to hear what happened because when you walk through something like that, it's hard to find people who love Jesus who want to hear about it, who can hear it
Yeah.
without interjecting or saying, but this or but that. And I experienced so much of that of people saying, well, did you give the pastor any reason to say those things to you? And don't touch the Lord's anointed. And that seems really strange that he would
Yeah.
do that. Is there more to this story? And just this immediate trying to figure out how God's anointed could possibly fail that way. Surely he wouldn't. So you must be the problem. You're not sharing your whole story. Like there's something else going on here. And the pain of having to defend your pain is brutal, and it makes it really really hard to heal when you go to tell your story and someone is immediately dismissing it. So my initial response is always, all right, let's see the wound, take the band-aid off, let me see how gross and gory it is under there, and then let's let it air out a little bit and see what we can do about patching you up in this conversation. And sometimes that ends up being a relationship that builds, and sometimes I have these conversations just like in passing at coffee shops where we can just recognize a shared pain in each other for some reason, and one person says something, the other person says something, and you're like, hang on a second, we had the same, you eye rolled when I said I used to be a youth pastor, what's going on there? Let's talk about it. And it's just this openness
Yeah.
to like, I'm not afraid of your gory wound, like just show it to me, let's see it.
Tell me about that. Tell me why you're not afraid, because I feel like some people are threatened
Yeah.
by like, my lived experience threatens some people's
Mm-hmm.
experience
Yeah,
because it makes them uncomfortable.
it does.
Uh, uh, why aren't you afraid?
Well, I think it goes back to that, like holding things so tightly. And when you're holding on to your
Yeah.
idea of what church should be or what church is, and somebody challenges that idea with a really painful story, your response is, I don't want to see it. I don't want to
Yeah.
look at that. And I think that looking at each other's wounds helps us understand each other more, and it helps us be the bride of Christ in a way that is truly reflective of the heart of Christ. And I don't think we can do that by refusing to look at somebody's mess. Obviously, we all have different capacities, and you kind of have to be aware of where you're at in your journey and how many stories, how many wounds
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
look at. With my work, I definitely have to take time to refill my my soul after I hear a
Yeah.
couple gory stories in a row. But I just don't think there's anything to be afraid of. It's not, somebody else's wound is not going to affect my relationship with God. It's not going to affect the way that I see the world because I've already engaged with so much pain that somebody else's pain. My response isn't, ooh, I don't want to see. It's, what can I do to help you?
I love that. That's beautiful. Unfortunately, I think it sometimes takes having a hard, painful situation yourself to get to that place to be
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, I used to be the one that was like, well, they must have done something.
Mm-hmm.
They must have done something wrong. They aren't a good fit for that church. Why did they go there then? Like, it's a little bit more complicated,
Yes,
a
it
little bit more
is.
complicated than
Yeah.
that is. But I also have so much empathy for people that also aren't in a position to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
because I just remember being the person that couldn't, because
Yeah.
that would cost me too much. There is a cost to being willing to see the truth. There are certain places you just can't go anymore, and you can't unknow things that you know.
So true.
And people really want you to be in a certain place, and if you bring nuance
Mm.
in some rooms, people don't want you there. And the nuance that says, "I love Jesus. And I absolutely believe you. I'm so sorry. Like, I believe it because I believe there's a sin nature. I believe we have a sin nature and that people
Yeah.
do stupid things.
Mhm.
Um, and it does not do any good for me to grill people. I think starting with, I'm just really sorry. I've seen it
Yep.
happen and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's just messy and hard. And being in this space too is really interesting. And I'm sure you've seen it too. We bump up against a lot of people at different stages of healing
Yeah.
with different amounts of activation. There are landmines
It's so
everywhere,
true. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So, yeah, how do you handle that? Deal with all of the messiness of it.
I try to have what I call serotonin deposits in my day. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of like a serotonin junkie. I'm always looking for things that are going to make me laugh or take my mind off things. When things are really heavy in the work that I do, I write a lot. I journal.
Yeah.
I have to process, and when I don't get it out of my system, it builds up, and you can't keep anything in ever. Like compartmentalizing is not a thing. Eventually, it's going to break out, and it's
Yeah.
not going to be, you're not going to probably realize that what it's connected to, but it's going to end up leaking out of you in some way. And that usually turns into me like rage cleaning or snapping at my husband or getting impatient with my kids.
Zach would be like, Kristen, could you rage clean instead of snapping at me?
He knows better than that.
I have seen you bring joy into dark spaces too, which I love. Like
Mhm.
my listeners need to go follow you on Instagram because some days you're sharing heavy things and some days you're having a
Mhm.
dance party. And I think that
Yeah.
is real life.
Mhm.
I think it's like bring your whole self. It wouldn't it be wonderful if we said to the world, our faith communities are a place for you to bring your own self, your
Mm.
rage cleaning
Yeah.
self, your sad self,
Yeah.
and your Taylor Swift dance party self. Bring it all. Let's do that.
That'd be great. There's actually a principle from a ministry called Life Model Works is where I learned it from, but it's called I'm happy to be with you no matter what. We're happy to be together no matter what. And it's this beautiful joy-fueled principle of making eye contact with people and showing them that you're happy to be with them no matter what's going on in their life. So I'm happy to be with you if you're depressed. I'm happy to be with you if you have really bad dance moves. I'm happy to be with you if you're rage cleaning. And it's this ministry of togetherness and the power and what happens in your brain neurologically when you make eye contact with somebody who's genuinely happy to see you is
Yeah.
transformational. So I try to incorporate that into my life, into our community, and pass that on to other people because it is so powerful when you are in a really dark season and somebody is happy to see you. They're not waiting for you to get better. They're just happy to be with you in the moment. I think that helps us heal and have dance parties in the dark in the dark seasons because we have
Yes.
people who are with us. It's great.
Yeah. I love the happy to be with you wherever you are because it doesn't send that message of, I'm really nervous and anxious about you being in this space and you need to get over
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
And when you get
exactly.
over it, I'll be here and ready for you.
Yep, exactly.
So when you get your act together,
Yeah, yeah.
we could be friends. You have talked a tiny bit about this, but I would love to have you talk about it here for my listeners. Is we have seen in the publishing world like a
Mhm.
reaction to the people that are dealing with pain.
Mhm.
And there's this reaction that says deconstruction is bad and we must stop it and it is evil and
Mhm.
it is like this gateway to Satan or something.
Mhm.
Like tell me what you would say to people that are like, why are people writing books saying that I'm doing it wrong? I
Yeah.
think you have thoughts on this, and I would love to hear them.
I do. There's a lot of different motivations for why
I
people
think it's
write
well
books
intentioned.
like
I think
that.
it is for the most part. Yeah.
Sometimes it's well intentioned. Sometimes I think it's capitalizing on a moment without good intentions and seeing
Sure.
a gap in the market and filling that gap regardless of how it harms people. I think
Yeah.
some of the recent books that have come out are more about rage baiting than
Yeah.
actually offering help because the books are not for people who are deconstructing. They're for people who are critical of deconstructing. And
Say that.
anybody
Yeah.
anybody who reads those books and finds a lot of merit in it haven't had their mind changed about it. They've just had their suspicions confirmed by these books, which is why I think they're really harmful because they actually don't bring understanding. They just say, yeah, you're right. They are trying to abandon their faith, and we should call them different things other than Christians because they're not real Christians. I think it's a
Mhm.
gross misunderstanding and a gross simplification of what's actually going on. And that's something that's really complex and nuanced to each individual person. And it's really a miss, man. You're missing out on a good conversation by doubling down on your misunderstandings. But that's just, those are some really filtered filtered thoughts that I have about that.
Yeah, I feel like it misses the point too. What are you trying to accomplish with a book that says you're doing it wrong?
Yeah.
And it does feel like you said preaching to the choir, like this is
Mm-hmm.
not a book for people that are hurting and
No, it
searching.
is not. Mm-mm.
It's a gatekeeping book that says those people out there are doing it wrong. And it makes me really sad
Yeah.
because I do not see how that helps move the needle in any positive way. If somebody is hurting, we don't tell them they're hurting wrong.
Right.
It just makes no sense to me.
Mm-mm.
Even if you do think they are in danger of doing something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the way to reach them.
No, it's a very
What's a better way?
Christianity is intrinsically a relational faith. And when you do
Yeah.
things like that, when you speak from a book or you speak from a platform and you're not actually engaging with the people that you're talking to or talking about, it is the antithesis of what the kingdom of God is about. And that's why it causes harm, because the kingdom of God is relational. And if you want to stop somebody from sliding down this imaginary slippery slope that I don't believe exists at all, except if it does, we're all on the slippery slope all the time.
Yes, yeah.
But if that's an actual fear for you, the best way to help somebody who you're afraid is going to spiral and lose their faith is to have a relationship with them, and a relationship that's not based or centered on your panic and fear about where their questions might take them. You can just have a relationship with somebody and not have it be about you saving them and preventing them from burning in whatever hell you've imagined they're going to burn in forever. Just be with people, sit with people, talk to people. You'll be surprised by what you learn, and you'll realize that people are not as much of a threat as you think they are from a distance, from your platforms, from your Instagrams, from your books.
I think it's the same sort of thing. Like people that are sharing the harmful books or the things I feel like are harmful, I don't think most of them are in a place to hear me say, "Hey,
Probably
I
not.
don't like it."
Yeah.
I have found what's more helpful in situations like that is for me to maybe ask if they're open to hearing another perspective. And
Yeah.
then when they are, sometimes they aren't, and then later on they are. I have found that to
Yeah.
be a really interesting way of approaching
Yep. It
hard,
happens all the
awkward
time.
conversation.
Mhm.
Tell me about your experience with I know you carry this, like, burden for not harming not traumatizing people with your story,
Mhm.
knowing how scripture has been, uh, weaponized against people.
Mhm.
Knowing that your lived experience of, in some ways, getting a prayer answered in a way you hoped
Mhm.
is very different than some people that prayed and God did not do the thing that they
Yeah.
asked. And so I would love to hear you kinda talk about how you hold those things together and, like, make space for both of those things.
Well, I think people think if you get the thing that you prayed for, everything's all good.
Yeah,
But for me, getting what I prayed for in this circumstance in the book, there are a lot of times that I didn't, which I also talk
yeah,
about in the book too.
mm,
But this specific thing that challenged my faith probably more than anything else, other than what we went through at our church, because I understood so deeply and had accepted so strongly that our story wouldn't end up that way, and knowing how fragile it was and knowing how most people who have all the things that we had, their story doesn't end up the way that ours did. And so I held that really, really closely. And it was one of the biggest things I had to process in therapy afterwards, because I don't want to say it was guilt, but it was just this: we cannot figure out the formula. There is no formula to move God's neck and to make him give us what we want him to give us. I've tried the
yeah.
formula, and I can't tell you why I don't get what I prayed for and why I did this time get what I have no idea. It was nothing that I did. It was no statement of faith, because I was just trying to survive. There was nothing brave and courageous happening. I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other. But I hold those tensions with both hands all the time. And my approach to all of that is that I think it's so important that we just bear witness to each other's pain and not try to make sense of it for ourselves or for someone else, because it's always going to end up leaving us aching, and we're
Yeah.
already aching, and we don't want to add to each other's ache. So my approach is to just make eye contact with people's pain and not be afraid to look at it, and not be afraid for that uncomfortable, you didn't get what you asked for and I did, and I don't know why. And I don't try to make it into anything like, well, you didn't get what you asked for because you didn't do what I did. I think
Yeah.
that is so toxic and so untrue. I didn't do anything. But I think the most important thing is to just bear witness to it and be present with people in the uncomfortable reality of not knowing why some things happen for others, or to others.
Yeah. I think that I don't know.
Yeah. I
It
don't
could be a
know.
hard thing to say,
Yeah.
but maybe the truest thing to say
Yeah.
is,
Absolutely.
I don't know. It does not make any sense. The
No.
way things happen, the different results that people get. I see an overarching theme in your book of, I don't know if it's like overtly said, but like this idea of reckoning with even prayer.
Mhm.
Like, what does it mean if I pray
Mhm.
enough? Is there such thing as enough? Not enough? What if
Mhm.
I get more people to pray? What and it's the formula of like, oh, I bet if I was fasting,
Mhm.
maybe I needed to be kneeling, maybe I needed to be standing, maybe I needed to be raising my hand of
Right.
like, but then that the reminder of no, because that once again
Mhm.
centers us.
Yep.
And we say we don't believe the prosperity gospel that says that if we do the right thing, we are blessed. We get
Mhm.
XYZ. But then we sort of live like it and we
Yep.
forget and we use the words that say that in a different
Mhm.
way. I remember around the time my kids were little tiny babies, and now my youngest is a freshman in high school. I remember like there was this is the mommy blog era. This was like 2009. This
Yep.
is like the height of it. And off a lot of these really popular mommy blogs were centered around their children's health issues. Do you remember
I
this?
do. Yes, I do. Yep.
They're like, you were following the people because their kids have major medical issues.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, it was what we did. It was wild. It was wild.
We're the
And some of
TLC
these,
generation.
we were one of them. Um, sweet, sweet woman. I still follow them. I bet they don't even agree with their past self.
Mm.
Most of us don't. I don't agree with our past self.
True.
And if the more words we have out in the world, the more we have to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, world.
Yep.
I was a different person.
Yep.
But this young mama said, their baby was in the hospital, newborn baby, and very popular blogger. So many people were praying, and she said, I just know that God is going to heal my baby because how could he not with all of these people
Mhm.
praying and
Yeah.
watching? Wouldn't it harm his name of some way? And I was like, I am a nobody.
Yeah.
And I just lost my mom really suddenly.
Mm.
And doesn't that sort of thing say, if I knew more people, if
Mhm.
I was more popular, God
Yeah.
would be more likely to answer my prayer?
Yeah.
But I don't think she meant that, but it was, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's one of those theologies that we pick up subtly. We just sort of absorb it without
yeah,
thinking through all the way. My husband always says I have implication brain. So if you tell me something's true, I'm gonna be like, well, if that's true, then this has to be true, and that has to be true, and that can apply in this
yeah,
situation, so it can't be true. And
yeah.
everything. It's really, I'm insufferable sometimes, but that's made being a Christian really hard because I'm like, wait a second, hang on, let's follow that theology all the way down.
Yeah,
But I don't think
yeah.
anybody picks something up like that and means it to be malicious or
No,
harmful,
yeah,
but it absolutely can be, because you're implying that you have to have social power to make God pay attention to you and leverage your influence so that God owes you something, and it turns into this entitlement, and it's really just a result of theology that hasn't been processed and hasn't been thought through, which is why I think it's so important that we need to think through the things that we believe before we're in a crisis. You got to think through these things, or if it doesn't work out the way that you think it's guaranteed to work out, your life is going to fall apart in an entirely different way.
I kind of saw implication brain at work while you were carrying your twins. Even while you're dealing with all these things and you desperately want people to pray for you,
Yeah.
I saw that even if he doesn't. I saw
Mm-hmm.
that like, hey, I'm not saying God's going to do this because y'all are following me,
Yeah.
or someone shared my post and more people are following me.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought that was really compassionate. And I think it likely is because you've just seen it go badly. Talk about that.
I've seen it go badly, and I've seen what can happen to communities when you gather around a crisis and are praying for a certain outcome and that doesn't work out the way that you're praying for it to work out, and how that can spiral people's faith and send people into
Yeah.
a crisis. So when people were saying that about my pregnancy, and they were saying, God, give us a victory so the world will see how good you are. I had seen so often God being good when I didn't have a victory, and I
Yeah.
knew that I was not guaranteed this. And even though I wanted it so desperately, I wanted people to pray, I still didn't understand, and I still don't understand how prayer can affect things like that. I don't know what the formula what the formula
Yeah.
is. If
Yeah.
more people pray, does God change his mind? I don't know. I think you could probably present a case for both things. And so I wanted people to pray more because I wanted I wanted that around me. I wanted that love around me, but I also wanted people to know that, and me asking you to pray for me, I'm not demanding that God give me a miracle. And my
Yeah.
faith, at least from this side of things, my faith is going to stay the same regardless of the outcome. And right here, before things go bad, I'm saying that God is good no matter what. And if things go bad, I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm not going
Yeah.
to leverage this for
Yeah.
some big thing. I think you have to really be aware of the privilege that we have to have people around us. If you have a platform, the privilege
Yeah.
that you have to have a platform from which to speak, and think about the millions of people all over the world who don't have a community. They don't have people who love them. They don't have a platform. They don't have social media. They don't have these ways to call upon the saints to pray for them. Is God any less good to them and any less willing to give them a miracle because they don't make a show of it? I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
some of the best miracles are really, really quiet, and nobody ever knows about them except the people who experience them.
Yeah. I have mentioned this a couple times, but it's like one of the highlights of my life, so I have to mention it. I got lucky enough that because someone got sick, I got to have dinner with Diane Langberg.
Oh.
Thanks, Jim, for getting sick. There was an extra chair at the table, and I was like,
Mhm.
I'll be there. And so I remember saying to her, hey, I sometimes feel like when things are really bad, like I've given God a pass. Like, okay, this was bad, this was bad, this was bad. I feel like, and I want to say to God, like, okay, I've hit my grief deductible.
Right.
Like, I have
Yeah.
hit that,
Mhm.
and now I should get a pass.
Yes.
I mean, this bad thing happened. That is
Yeah.
enough bad things. I want the weather sunny. I didn't
Mhm.
want my kids sick. I would like them
Mhm.
sleeping through the night. Um, this doesn't make any sense. And she chuckled and she was like, yeah, but Jesus didn't get a pass. And I was like, doggone it, Dr. Langberg.
She Jesus juked you.
Come on, Diane. But it's so very true.
Yeah.
Jesus begged God
Yeah.
if there was another way, if there was
Mhm.
any other way, can we do it another way, God? And
Mhm.
he chose to not do it another way. And it wasn't because he wasn't praying, right?
Right.
Or that he had secret sin in his life. Or, like if he was just like
Oh gosh.
standing on his
Yeah.
head or something. Like we cannot look at that and say, you will get what you ask for if you do
Mhm.
it right every
Yeah.
time. Because Jesus did it right. If anybody
Yeah.
did it right, it was Jesus. And he didn't
Yeah.
get what he asked
It's
for.
true. Yeah.
And he probably hit his deductible.
Oh,
His grief
easily. He
deductible.
was born meeting his deductible.
I wanted to like ask a few lighthearted things
Okay.
as we wrap this up. I know it's been a little bit chaotic, but I feel like a chaos energy about me today. But
I love it.
I would like to ask you, and if somebody's already asked you this, I'm gonna feel really bummed.
Okay.
If you had a theme song, Kristen, what would it be?
Mm.
Like if either that or walk up music for when you walk up to give your
Oh
big
my gosh.
talk wherever you are, the hype music is playing. What is it?
Oh. Well, it's gonna be a Taylor Swift song, probably. It would be a toss up between I Forgot That You Existed or I Did Something Bad.
I love it, and I hope this is at a Christian, like, event because it
Oh,
adds a whole
absolutely.
extra
Yeah.
flavor, like, here we are.
Yeah.
Also, do you eat food at potlucks that people bring and just put on the table?
I do. Is that bad?
You do. Well, some people are nervous about, like, they don't know where it came from. Okay,
Oh,
so what are
because
you
you can't
bringing?
eat
What are
at
you
everybody's
bringing?
house. Oh, what am I bringing to a potluck? I will bring cowboy caviar or
Okay.
like a buffalo chicken dip or something.
Okay, I would have that. I
I
would
like a
definitely
dip.
have
What
that.
can I say?
This is gonna go on the quote card on Instagram. What can I
A chip
say?
dip. A chip
Here
dip.
is this is the takeaway. Chip dip, cowboy
There you go.
caviar.
Yeah, very deep stuff today.
This is good. Thank you for coming and just thank you for being you. Thank you for
Thank
existing.
you.
Thank you for sharing your story in a way that is caring and compassionate, not feeling the need to defend God, but say here's some things that I've experienced and welcome, welcome. So, how can we support you? How can we find your book?
You can find it anywhere. It's out on
Places.
February 20th, so anywhere you want to buy the book, you can. You can follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, Kristen.LaValley, and I have a Substack blog as well.
So great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and,
Yeah.
I cannot wait for I know my listeners will love your book. I've had a chance to read it, and it's lovely. It made me laugh. I laughed, I cried, it moved me. It was great. So, thank you
Five
so
stars,
much.
right?
5 stars, that's right. Thanks so much, Kristen.
Thank you.